So, this video is about the legendary Pamola. This is what it means to be from Maine. And I have to be honest, I never knew this legend about Pamola until most recently. Although I did, when I lived in Maine, have many experiences. However, I never made the connection to the name. Now, I did hear, and I did know, and I did see places with the name Pamola, like Pamola Motor Lodge. I don't know if that's still there or not. I haven't been home in a long time. How about Pamola Trailer Park? Yeah, Pamola was a common name while I was growing up, like Katahdin. So, in my view, on a regular daily basis, I saw Mount Katahdin. We all did when we lived there. So now that I know that there's a legend about Pamola, let me make some connections. You know, there's much to be said about a connection, like an object in your life that you hold on to that ties you back and connects you to people, places, and things. And those objects are very important to you. So those objects can stay something, like if you're having a problem with something, some event that happened to you, and maybe that object can stop the triggering of those memories for that event. But when somebody takes that object away from you, all those memories and stuff come back. Disregard that sound. That is my friends over there. They're foxes. And they're making some noises. And they have different little, when they get snappy at each other, I'll tell you. They make one hell of a series of noises. They're adorable. Sweetie, what are you doing? That's my little heart, my fox heart, sweetie. Anyways, back to Pamola. I get sidetracked so easy, it's unbelievable. So, as far back as I can remember, almost like there's this haunting in the woods up in Maine. But I never made the connection to this legend, let alone the name Pamola, to what I experienced in my life when I lived in Maine. So let me try to make some connections for you, okay? As far back as I can remember, as a small child, I was gravitated almost like a unnatural pull into the woods. And so it was so bad that I used to sleepwalk, and I would leave the house while everyone was sleeping and go into the woods and then return. Okay? Almost like a nocturnal child before I even knew anything about nocturnal animals. Okay? And I do remember specifically the house that we lived in. Me and my three sisters shared a room. And on one side, the non-window side, my oldest sister and my little sister slept in a bed. And on the other side, where the window was, me and my older sister slept in a bed. And on that side, at the foot of the bed, there was like a little, pathway in between the bed and the dresser, which, if you're from New England, a dresser is a bureau, okay? Like the Bureau of Investigation. So I would sleep on my sister would sleep closest to the wall. I would sleep closest to the door until they made some changes because I kept sleepwalking. But I remember sliding out of the bed and not making a sound, and then tiptoeing to the edge of the bed, on the little pathway, which was not, it was like 2 feet in between the dresser and the bed. And I would stand at the window and I'd stare at the moon. And I remember specifically that I used to see, it looked like images of eyes in the woods, but it didn't scare me. Like animal eyes looking at me. Lots of them. And there was this old owl that would sit in this very old pine tree that was in the yard, and he'd go, ooh, ooh. And so, it was like comforting. I couldn't sleep, and then I'd walk to the window, stare at the moon. I'd see the owl, and for whatever reason, I'd, get back in bed and fall asleep. But then I'd get up and not know that I got up, and I'd exit the house. And then to this day, I don't remember where I would go, but they would always find me returning from the woods. So it became like a concern, okay? And I ended up going into counseling for that because there was something drawing me to them woods. And when I went through counseling, the doctors had me, kids can't verbalize shit, especially, 3, 4, 5 years old. So they have you draw. And I remember, so who do you go visit in the woods? And I drew this picture of this great big huge bird walking on this path. And it was a pretty good picture too. My mother held on to it for years. And then she passed it on to me when I was a full adult with kids. And I never made the connection between that picture and counseling and my sleepwalking until they took all my shit away from me. And then I'm like, oh yeah. Because I remember looking at it shortly before they took all my stuff away from me. But that was probably like one of my earliest memories of this thing that I did not know, even though I'm from Maine. Nobody talked about a legend when I was growing up, this legend of Pamola. I do specifically remember other things. I remember that the house that we lived in actually belonged to my grandmother. And it had this great big huge dirt mound on the side of it. I mean, it was a pretty big dirt mound. And I remember going up that dirt mound, and it was pretty high. And I would crouch down and I'd like pick the blueberries that were up there and watch my mother and my sisters run out of the house frantically screaming my name. And I wouldn't do anything but watch them run around in the yard. And I do remember this man with wings. It's almost like a bird landed right behind me, and then a man said, "Is somebody looking for you?" And then he gave me his hand and led me down the path and then flew away. And I went to see my mother. So I do remember that stuff. I have to say, based on my memories I believe this legend of Pamola is very true. I used to, as a teenager, back in the late 70s and 80s, everybody, I'm talking everybody, was on this, they were on health craze overtime. Okay. And, like we watched what we ate, exercise, walk everywhere. I used to ride my bicycle from the house that we lived in while I was a teenager all the way down to where we used to live when I was a little teeny kid. And then I would ride back and get home for dinner. That would be like in the summer, something to do. Sorry about that. And I specifically remember this one day. I rode my bicycle all the way down there on Route 157. And I'm on my way back, so I'm heading north. I'm going up over a hill. And I can hear it on the left hand, so I'm on the right hand side of the road. I'm heading home. And in the woods, I can hear it's like a little kid crying. So I stop in my tracks and I'm like, what the fuck? What is a little kid doing out in the woods? And I can hear it crying, a kid crying. And I say, what the fuck? So I cross the road and I step into the bush. And let me tell you, I don't know what it's like there today because I haven't been there in a long time, but back then in the 80s, those woods were thick, really thick. And it was sappy, very sticky and sappy walking through those woods. Okay? Like the pine trees, everything was, like globs of sap everywhere. And I remember I walked into this clearing and I sat down on this log and I was like, how come I'm not hearing this kid crying? I mean, I heard it real, like it was like intense. And I get in the middle of the woods and I'm standing there and I hear nothing. So I sit down on this log and I'm like, waiting to hear this kid cry. And then I started crying. And I'm wiping away my tears and stuff. And I'm like, I see something out there in the woods. And it's like these two red things side by side. And I'm like adjusting my eyes, going, what the fuck is that? Like, it almost looks like the sun's coming through two holes, but it's red, not yellow or amber or, or orange or anything. It's like this piercing red. And so like the red coming through these, I think it's holes in like an old log. It's like really getting intense. It's actually a wolf. And so, you're taught from a young age when you're in Maine, you encounter an animal, you're out in the woods, you just sit your ass tight. Control your breathing. They'll either go away or if they come up to you, don't fucking make any sudden moves. And that's what I did. Sure enough, that wolf came right up, walked right around me like in a circle. And it's like I could feel myself about to lose my shit with my breathing and all that stuff. And I tie that now back to this legend of Pamola. Because, yeah, there's something different up there. The size of animals that you encounter in the woods, they're not the same size that you find down here in New York. They're larger. They're really fucking big. The size of the animals up in northern Maine are fucking huge. And the thing is, I was never afraid to walk in those woods. My father used to say to me all the time, there's nothing in those woods that can hurt you. So go walk them, walk as far as you want to go, because there's nothing up there that can hurt you. So I never made the connection between this legend that no one ever talked about when I was growing up, this legend of Pamola, the legend of Mount Katahdin, to what I just saw on some videos. But I have to say, there's probably a lot of truth to it. And so, I have already, because it's what I do, I'm all about Ericorian things, okay? And I like to take a word, run a line of code. It's almost like it opens up another chapter in the story about the Iroquois. Because there's something about the Iroquois that I really like. And I just happen to be here in New York. But you know something? The Iroquois, there were a lot of them. And so they held spots in many places, from what I understand. And so I'm going to say to be continued on this legend of Pamola, because the next video, I'm going to run some code on this shit. And I'm going to open up yet another chapter in my Ericorian book of stories and see where it goes. Yep. Some things you just miss about life, but then there's some things that'll never be the same because the people aren't there in the same places. So Mount Katahdin might still be standing, but my mother's not up there. And I don't know if it would feel the same to go up there. As much as I'd like to, I don't think it would feel the same. To be continued, Pamola.